Good morning, Nigeria. Welcome to Daybreak on Trust Television. It's the 10th of November 2021. I am Zainab Bala.
And I am Dashan Husseina Usman. Thanks for joining us once again. It is a beautiful day, like I always say, to be alive. And yesterday, thank God for the showers of rain. It's been a really, really long time and the heat became unbearable at some point. But with the rains yesterday, the weather is chill and,
Is it chill? Because some will say
is.
it's not supposed to rain in November, actually, and it's going to only, you know, explore more heat and all of that.
Yeah, but then, we're talking about climate change today. So,
Right.
this is one of, I think, one of the reasons why it rained in November. But whatever the case, it has actually aided in reducing the heat.
Right.
Yes, it did.
Okay, today on Daybreak, as the world unites to tackle climate change at Glasgow, Scotland, what are the conversations regarding climate change in Nigeria? We'll be joined by Aliyu Sadiq, an environmentalist and a climate change advocate.
And we would also be joined by Dr. Tefa Abraham, and he'll be here to talk about the economic growth and recovery plan today. That will be our second discussion.
Okay, before we do that, let's take a look at the 10th of November in world history.
on Today in History, in 2010, Nigerian trade unions called off a strike protesting the minimum wage across, the nation. And one day into the planned three-day action, the strike was called off at the end of negotiations, where the government of the day made promises to raise the wage, and the monthly minimum wage then was 7,500, and it promised to raise it to 30,000, by the way, 30,000. And World Science Day for Peace and Development is today. Also, it's International Accounting Day, also known as International Accountants Day. Today is National Forget-Me-Not Day and a Vanilla Cupcake Day as well. Now, talking about a minimum wage, a very touchy subject. A lot of states, according to reports, are yet to implement this minimum wage. And we've seen a lot of inflation come and go. We've seen a lot of hike in commodity, a lot of things happening. It makes me wonder how people are able to survive.
It's the whole conversation around the minimum wage issue, has been lingering for years. You can see then it was from 7,500 naira down. We are going to 30,000, all of that. But some states were even saying they can't be able to pay that, that amount. And until now, it's been a lingering issue. But we just hope this comes to stop, in Nigeria, and we'll move further away from this subsequently.
Hopefully. And this is another reason why we'll be talking about the economic growth and recovery plan as well today. And then today being World Accountants Day, a big shout out to all the accountants, all over the world.
Calculating the money.
Nigeria, yes. It's not easy calculating money that, isn't yours. How do they do it? Like bankers, accountants, how do they actually do it?
Some of us actually think that accountants are rich people. Yeah. But most of them say, no, it's not our money. We only count these monies.
And, there are lots of them, especially the accountants who are trustworthy. A big shout out to them, honestly. It is not easy because you've had cases where lots of accountants have been arrested, for stealing money, for, dragging just one or two. Especially when they don't have a means of, let me just say eating, for the day, but they have to count other people's money, a big shout out to you, by the way.
It's also Forget-Me-Not Day. I remember they say Forget-Me-Not, they'll send you a card or something and say, this is called Forget-Me-Not. What does Forget-Me-Not actually mean?
It means don't forget me, in simple terms, okay? And I remember when we were kids, we used to take flowers or four-leaf clovers, and then we'll pluck one and say, forget me not, forget me. So wherever it stops. A funny one, by the way. And vanilla cupcake. Who doesn't love cake?
Do we celebrate that in Nigeria, or is it more like a foreign thing? Cupcakes.
It's a lot of things we actually do in Nigeria is mostly foreign. It's borrowed. Yes, it's borrowed. So vanilla cupcake day. If you can borrow stuff, why not borrow vanilla cupcake day? We love cake, so what can we say?
Okay, this will be a discussion for another day. To move, down to the show, we're going to be taking a look at the dailies today on Daybreak, and we have Sunday Michael, Deputy Business Editor, Daily Trust, to review the papers right after this break. Stay with us.
But in a situation where you find that look like the same,
not necessarily tribal or regional.
but I have said that.
All right, welcome back. It is now time for the dailies today, and in the studio we have Sunday Michael. You're welcome to the studio. Thanks.
It's a pleasure to be here again. Thank you.
Okay, so we'll start with Daily Trust, a newspaper, and we have a few headlines here on the front page. The first one being bandits kill 7 policemen in Zamfara. And this can be found in page 8. This is a really, really sad development. We also have Anambra governorship saying Soludo maintains lead as INEC collates Ihiala's results. We hope there won't be any cause for concern once the results come out. And the main story, the major story, written in bold in the front page of the newspaper here says, residents decry rot in FCT as reps summon minister. And we have a few writers here. Legislators frown at poor waste management, say Abuja terribly unsafe. Chide Bello over non-appointment of mandate secretaries. And more of this particular story can be found in page 5. Moving on to the footnote of the newspaper. After Daily Trust report, federal government orders NNPC to collect freight charges for petrol in Naira. I remember we talked about this yesterday. An accusation that NIMASA and National Ports Authority, collect freight charges in dollars instead of Naira. Okay, moving on to more stories. National Assembly okays e-transmission of election results, direct primaries, and that can be found in page 38. Page 6, you can find readership drop affecting newspapers' revenue, and that's from NPAN. And this particular story here on page 4 says food security. Nigeria plans Operation Feed Yourself. We'll find out more about that.
We'll get to hear the details of that story.
Later.
Actually responding to the Anambra governorship elections about Soludo maintaining leadership as INEC Colette Ihiala. Actually, ABGA candidate Charles Soludo wins Anambra governorship election. It has recently, been announced. Let's take a look at some of the stories on the Punch newspaper this morning. The big headline there states e-transmission of results, direct primaries. Governors run to Buhari as senators, reps defy parties, transmit bill next week. A writer is saying National Assembly members outsmart governors, pass Electoral Act amendment bill. Another writer is saying we will veto bill if Buhari fails to assent legislation, says federal lawmakers. And you find on page 17 of the Punch newspaper, field depots to pay NNPC's shipping charges in Naira. And on page 17 of the Punch newspaper, anchor borrowers, farmers owe CBN 463 billion naira as defaults rise. And on page 8 of the Punch newspaper, bandits gunned down 7 policemen on patrol in Zamfara. Burn van. That's quite sad, isn't it? You'll find the details of that story on the Punch newspaper. And on page 18, you'd find aviation fuel price rises by 70%. International airlines may rise fares. We're already having high airfares, and already with the rise in fuel price, it looks like it's going to be really alarming.
Wow.
Okay. And on page 8 of the Punch newspaper, you'd find 20 billion bailout. Kogi Assembly threatens to order bank MD's arrest. So these are some of the stories you'd find on the Punch newspaper this morning.
Okay, I'm moving on to the Guardian newspaper. Yes, we have Anambra Guba. INEC declares Soludo winner. Big congratulations to him. And a writer here that says, unknown gunmen in shootout with security operatives. Moving on to the next story with a pictorial there. NAS snobs APC governors, passes electoral bill with direct primaries. And it says INEC to determine results transmission mode. Direct primaries now mandatory for political parties. Another writer here says lawmakers to transmit electoral bill to Buhari within 7 days. APC governors oppose direct primary may truncate presidential assent. Direct primaries will overstretch INEC, says PGF chairman, and PDP says no party has right to impose its processes on another. We also have on the footnote there, Kogi Assembly threatens to arrest bank MD, and you can find details of that story on page 5. Europe begins restitution of Africa's looted artifacts, and you can find that on page 4. Still on page 5, gunmen kill retired AVM daughter orderly in Kaduna. This is yet another sad one.
story.
Yes. On page 7, you'd find IPOB gives Uzodimma ultimatum to free members. And the final story on Guardian newspaper here on page 7, you can find Kanu to appear in court today for treason trial as IPOB declares sit at home. All right, with that, we'll move on to the next paper.
Okay, let's take a look at the stories on the Nation newspaper this morning. You'd see right there, Soludo is governor-elect. INEC declares ABGA candidate winner of Anambra poll, and he stood out by getting 112,229 votes. You find on page 2 of the Nation newspaper, government proposes death penalty for illegal gold miners. Yes, I've been waiting, anticipating to see that. You recently traveled to Jos.
Yes.
Usually when you go there, you see they just mine and just leave the pools like that. So, and it's really terrible that they leave them like that.
Especially, the land, and people dying a lot when they dig wells and, it collapses.
Just let them be like that.
So.
Okay, right on page 3 and 4 of the Nation newspaper, you'd find 7 policemen, Air Force chief grandson, killed. And on page 7 and page 30, you'd find crude oil production drops to 1.52 million per barrel. You'd also find Buhari in France for peace forum. Still on the Nation newspaper, you'd find direct primary, Governors National Assembly clash. So these are some of the major stories on the Nation newspaper.
All right, we'll move on to the final newspaper, which is the Daily Sun. Anambra fears gun battle precedes victory dance. And a few writers here. Soludo maintains lead, security gunmen exchange fire in Ihiala. And that particular story can be found on page 13 of the Daily Sun. Moving on, murder of Super TV boss Chidinma trial adjourned to November 11. You can find that on page 5. Invasion of Justice Odili's home. Senate indicts EFCC, AGF Malami, and police. And a writer here that says demands disclosure of probe panel's findings, tasks IGP on missing Vanguard reporter as reps seek investigation. And that particular story can be found on page 6. Moving on to more stories. Buhari vows to end annual $2 billion wheat importation. And it says federal government states more Operation Feed Yourself to counter malnutrition. And that can be found on page 8. Bandits kill 7 policemen in Zamfara state. Gunmen murder retired NAF officer. Abduct 13 local government workers in Kaduna. And this story can be found on page 4 and 5. In 2023, imams, others lobby for Middle Belt presidency. And the writer here says PDP group asks Wike to join presidential race. This story can be found on page 26. Reps summon FCT minister over rising insecurity. Say Abuja has never been this unsafe. This story can be found on page 6. And on page 2, 20 billion naira bailout fund. Kogi Assembly threatens warrant of arrest against bank MD. And we have the lead story here saying NAS, PDP, APC clash over direct primary. Lawmakers pass Electoral Act Amendment Bill, include electronic transmission of election results, promise to transmit bill to Buhari for assent in 7 days. And this story can be found on page 7. And the final story on the footnote says IPOP declares sit at home as Kanu appears in court today. Can be found on page 4. And these are the stories on the Daily Sun.
Okay, we earlier told you that we have Sunday Michael, Deputy Business Editor, Daily Trust, in the studio to review, some of the stories on the dailies this morning. Earlier when we were talking about minimum wage, you giggled a little. Would you like to comment on that?
The issue of minimum wage is an emotional one. She was talking about how the minimum wage barely even take you home. But the reality is the standard of living across these countries are not, across the country is not the same. The cost of rent, say in Abuja, Port Harcourt, Lagos, maybe some other high-profile cities, are not the same thing with Sokoto, Zamfara, Kebbi, Niger. And minimum wage projections and calculations are supposed to take care of some of these things. So you want to think that people who live in places where they have to cough out more should earn a bit more, so that they can realistically meet ends meet. School fees for private schools around these places are also not the same. The cost of a basket or a tuber of yam here is not the same as you will get, say, in Sokoto and the rest of that. So it's a conversation that has to continue to happen. But, at the bottom of everything is it's not enough for you to even get so much money and the prices of everything, goes above the roof. So much money needs to happen on the other side. There needs to be peace for the farmers to go to farm, because it is with excess food that the prices of food can come down. Aviation fuel, production of our own fuel in country has to happen, so that prices of transport would also drop, so that the cost of moving these things would also come down. It is at that point that even if you earn 20,000 naira in a month, perhaps it may be able to do something for you. But like I said, it's an emotional issue. There is no right and wrong answers when it comes to the argument. The labor people don't want to hear anything. Just jack this amount. Even when they started, what they were realistically asking for was over 65,000. It wasn't even where we are today. But it also doesn't make sense, even if they give you 100,000 and the next day you go to the market and everything skyrockets. So.
Right.
Okay, talking about minimum wage, let's talk about food security and the plans for Nigeria to start Operation Feed Yourself. Now, the Vice President said Operation Feed Yourself is simply to encourage Nigerians to establish urban farms and homestead gardens. What do you have to say about this?
It's the way to go. And to be fair, a great deal of Nigerians are already doing that. I'm participating in a seminar since yesterday, and just about every speaker who comes up is saying, I'm into farming, I hope when I leave this place I will go back to my farm. So I think that realization is catching up. What we also need is the technology to catch up. When you go to places like Egypt and Israel, it marvels how countries that are in the desert and on rocky sands are able to even do more agric than those of us with the potentials of a land that can feed the whole of Africa. There's something they are doing that we obviously are not borrowing from. We know about greenhouse farms that put out pests and quadruples the output of production when it comes to things like tomato, cucumber, and fresh farms. We know about, today I saw a technology that allows you to farm yams right at your backyard. You don't need any space. You just need a bag of cement filled with sand, and you put your tuber in it and create the opportunities for the leaves to rise up. That's all. And you do your watering every morning, which is what you expect the rainfalls to do for you. And that is that.
Wow.
And depending on the sack with which you put the tuber in it, the yams can grow to any size you can get from an actual farm.
Wow, that's interesting.
So that's knowledge. That's a gap that we need to close, and these things do not require all the space in the world. And even with the places where we have space, today, what the average Kenyan farmer or European farmer gets from a space of land is quadruple what we get, because of the right kind of seed, the right kind, parameters that we can also replicate here if the knowledge is available. We have left farming to peasants, who can barely even afford fertilizers or the kind of chemicals or the conditioning of the soils that are necessary. So it is now time for people to begin to approach farming not necessarily as something that you need to feed yourself, but as a business, because it is truly a business. If even playing within the value chain alone, do you know what it takes for a young person who moves Bambara seed, from the north to the east, where it's a staple food, or moving beans from Sokoto to Lagos, or moving plantain from Benin to Abuja, where it is needed almost in every home, because children have to go to school in the morning and they need these things to balance their diet. So there's quite a number, and as we create value on this chain, we would not only be feeding ourselves, we'll be providing jobs that we seem to be wasting as it is right now. If you go to the Middle Belt, for instance, some scientists were saying the oranges produced between Taraba and Benue is sweeter than what Coca-Cola uses for its Fanta, the citrus, the quality. But all of the citrus that we need today for the amount of Fantas that we consume in this country is coming in from Tanzania. So what's wrong with processing the one in country? The other day we heard that the guys who produce fruities would discontinue their operations because securities are threatening their expatriates, and that operation has shut down. Those are jobs going away for branding, for bottling, for transportation, for haulage.
Terrible.
Those are jobs you have made. So if you travel along those routes, once they harvest the oranges and take to the market and nobody buy, what do? They come back to the road and just splash them. Those are economic waste, really, you know.
Okay, now there's this story about residents decry rot in FCT as reps summon minister. Yesterday there was a piece where we saw the House of Representatives accusing the 6 area councils in the FCT of not maintaining the infrastructure within the FCT. Let's take a look at this piece that was sent in before we discuss some of the issues.
The administrative structures of government is not infrastructure. Without the enabling personnel, Mr. Speaker, nobody can perform magic. You can't do all the job. That administration must be enabled. We must see things happen. You delegate responsibilities. Our responsibility is not advisory. We got to get him to do the job. And if there are some imperfections and things that we cannot do, when we interrogate him and interview him, we can refer to the committees to conclude the job. That is how it is done. It's not a matter of wanting to, look, it's not selective. We want somebody we have hired for a job. Let him give us responses to issues we have raised. So I do not think we are trying to impinge on the responsibilities we have given to the committees. The debt of infrastructure, the absence of street lights, the ones that are there that are not working, makes it impossible for our citizens to be secure. Somebody is kidnapped or somebody is missing from Gariki. Lecturers are kidnapped from their homes. And schools are invaded. And you're telling me about infrastructure. It's not only infrastructure. Our citizens are not secure. And somebody we've hired for a job, we are not looking for somebody who have taken money. We are looking for somebody who have hired the job, who is not doing it or doing it.
Okay, so there you have it, legislators frowning at a lot of, things going wrong in the FCT. Let's have your thoughts on this, Mr. Sunday.
As we were saying before the cameras came over, bad as the situation may be, it's also gladdening that we exist in a space with these people and they are beginning to feel the heat because by the time they are done with the puppet, it will just surely get to the Maitamas and the Asokoros of this world. And they are also feeling the stench, of some of these places that are kept. It's saddening. A city that is supposed to be a model city, a pride for the African continent, one that is revered, across the world as one of the finest, could reduce to what it is today. It's only in Abuja that you will pass a place in the morning and by evening, refuge would not allow you to use the same route. And to think that they spend about 8 billion naira to clean refuge in this city it's crazy. So there are quite a number of issues that they raise. Prime, on top of all of what they have said, is the issue of insecurity. It's sad. If you think of the location of the University of Abuja, just adjacent the international airport and military installations, and the distance you really have to drive off from that place to get out of the city, and a spectacular attack like that could be coordinated in a place that you ordinarily would think is not even fanciful for those kind of attack, beats anybody's imagination. It then means that for you and I, who nobody even cares where we live or what we do, they could just pick us and for several weeks nobody will even know anybody is missing, The issue of our colleague the Vanguard journalist also came up for
Yeah.
mention,
Yes,
you
yes,
know,
yes.
and it's really a cause for concern that people can just disappear off the surface of this city, no other place than the capital city, and we cannot even account for it. We can't even begin to put a trace to what has happened, to even speculate whether this is a kidnap or any kind of thing for that matter. So it's really painful. Look at the issues of street right. You are driving around this city, you are worried. It's like driving into a wilderness. To maintain just bulbs for a capital city, that's crazy. Other places are managing to do this, and it's not rocket science. If the bulbs are dead, you replace them. The bulbs are not the most expensive items in this world. It doesn't require any kind of technology other than the maintenance department simply doing their work. You know, so it's good that the House of Rep members and the senators don't live in the moon, because if they could afford to live in the moon, perhaps we would have to live with this plight for a long time. It is good that people know other than people at that level are calling attention to these things. And I mean, look at, sometimes you wonder whether you are in a capital city. Painfully, some states are doing better with less income. We just saw the IGRs of state. After Lagos, Abuja came in even second, higher than Rivers. So we want to really see how and to what extent this huge IGR is put into use for the benefit of people who live in Abuja. You know, so it's good that they are raising this. It's long overdue, and I hope that this is a wake-up call for the people at the FCT.
Okay. Another story of interest is about the e-transmission of results and direct primaries. According to the Punch, governors run to Buhari as senators, reps defy parties, transmit bill next week. We have been seeing quite a lot of conversations, you know, around the e-transmission of result, and now there's been an ascent to that. What are your thoughts about that?
For me, as a journalist, as a Nigerian, I think it's victory for democracy. You know, we had this conversation here on 2 or 3 occasions. What we have seen is a battle for the soul of this country by people who have the means and the power to put forward their own interests ahead of what should be a national interest. What are we even saying? Rather than have people who pretend to represent us go to a process, hijack the process, and install their interests in the name of representing us, we want to be part of the process. How difficult is that? Direct primaries, if you are a card-carrying member of a party, you should have the opportunity to decide who the candidates of those parties are. Rather than all these collegial systems where they said, no, 2-3 people will represent us here, and those 2-3 people will become materials for the highest bidder at this convention, and whoever gives them the highest lot, they pass the buck and interest of their states to those persons as though they are representing truly the wishes and aspirations of this. And we know these are not true. You know, so 2 things. It will broaden the interest in political participation. If you know your voice will count, you will want to participate, you know. Like the elections in Anambra, that is what we are seeing. Because people voted and they could see that their choices, you know, were reflected in the outcomes of the result, other people will take interest to say, oh, let's go. These guys did it in Anambra. We can do it also in another place. All right. So, but if it had failed to manifest, because forget what outcomes are, people know what the popular choice is down there, right? If the outcomes do not reflect those popular choices, it only widens the whole talk around voters' apathy.
Right.
It's the same thing with political participation. If we do not open up the space for people to feel that they are a part of a decision and take ownership of that decision, they will continue to feel, whatever you do, these guys will always have their way. So there is no need wasting my time. Let me dedicate it to how I raise my naira and kobo to keep ends meet. So I think this is a victory for us. Painfully, it's the governors always wanting to have their way, and this time the rep members yielding, because they were almost going to give in, right? So yielding to the popular cry, you know, from the citizenry that you are going to betray public trust by not yielding to this popular demand. The electronics voting, beautiful. I mean, if it wasn't going to work, it wouldn't have worked in Anambra.
Right.
At any rate, it is not, it has its own hitches, but nothing is exactly perfect, as we have seen even with the United States, whose election was marred with all kinds. We saw in the US that election results went on and on for more than a week. So it's nothing special if it's happening here for a place with high broadband penetration for us who are struggling with infrastructures and all of that. So it's about being patient. It's about going through a process that is foolproof, where nobody can replicate your thumbprint or your biometrics, and where those positions you have taken can be re-verified, and not just people sitting somewhere and thumbprinting 5,000 ballot boxes and then throw. And then even in terms of cost, we spend so much doing elections in this country. 100 billion, 200 billion. Imagine 100 billion sank into road construction in a state,
Right.
or even into food productions, or even into our health system. You know what the size of 100 billion naira hospital would be? Just for a 1 week exercise, yeah, it's important, but there are better ways we can do it. So if we could do it electronically, where we could show up with electronic gadget and then register these votes, and it manifests and it saves us all that paper, all that logistics of transporting some of these things, why not? This is 2021, for God's sake, you know.
Right.
And I think that's the way to go.
Okay, now let's talk about the Anambra governorship election. Soludo has been declared the winner. Well, some will say we didn't see that coming. What are your thoughts about that?
I honestly also did see that coming, largely because he's been in the race before. This is not his first time. And Anambra, for his peculiar nature, you know, seems to defy odds. Kind of. They are beginning to create an identity of sorts for themselves. But as much as I didn't see it coming, in my heart of heart, I really wanted leaders that look slightly to reflect some of our aspirations as a people. So sometimes we have argued that perhaps if the quality and the education of our leaders was top-notch, they will also raise the bar. It's not exactly true every time, but there's a professor in Brno, and all of us can attest to. But again, there's another professor somewhere else who comes up with these mighty budget names, but we don't see them exactly in the streets. But the idea is, from my mind, I am looking at a leader who had proved himself at a national level. Some of the innovations that he brought to the CBN and some of the reforms that he brought to the Nigerian economic system, it's what has kept the bank viral, despite all of the kind of challenges they had faced. And I think that given the opportunity, he can, advance the cause of that state, because Anambra is a sleeping giant. With all the things that go on there, that state can be better placed, to be contributing to national discourse and to become a model for other states to say, we want to see how you are doing it, like we say with Lagos every time. To talk about a city that has the highest number of billionaires in this country, that have factories that are mentioned. Anambra is a state where you have a NAMCO that produces car, and the innocent motors So a complete town in Anambra is dedicated to manufacturing, and you need to show up there and see the kind of ingenuity. People converting car engines to generators and running industrial complex for 24 hours. We need to understand what's happening there. We need to be replicating those positive stories across the length and breadth of this country. But because they've allowed a certain kind of people, dictate the narrative of that state for a long time, and so they whittle down, the picking order. Maybe a Soludo, like he promised the last time he came, that he will make Anambra a Taiwan. And maybe people are really looking forward to
really
a small
hopeful.
Taiwan in Anambra, which is coming. So we wish him well, and what we'll do now as journalists is to sit back, look at where we can offer praise or criticism as he journeys through his own tenure.
Okay, let's talk about something that's of concern to, every single Nigerian and seems to come up every day, and that's insecurity. Talking about the bandits that killed policemen in Zamfara, 7 policemen in Zamfara, and also the AVM, his daughter and his orderly that, were killed in Kaduna. Let's have your thoughts on this.
Every life is important, whether it's that of a security personnel or even a citizen for that matter. But it's even more scary when your first line of defense is breached. When you come around an environment, some of the things that give you peace of mind is the presence of security apparatus or security personnel. More so when they get killed in the line of duty. It's not like a robbery or they had accident, but a frontal attack, you know, well calculated, deliberate, well, it's an affront on the state, you know, because this guy, the uniform they put on is a symbol of the state, and the state is you and I, you know. They are not at war. Well, it may be a war zone of some sort, but I mean, these are people on a patrol, gunned down. And the painful thing is, we hear these stories and there are nothing else around how, whether they were chased down, whether there were responses from our own security apparatus, whether they were there is no sane country where you do these kind of things and just walk away. You know, that's the painful part. And we need to, it also calls for the need to reappraise our strategy. I remember sometimes in Bauchi, around 2010 and 2012, while I was working there, and the security situation became very dire. You rarely will find a single vehicle going on a patrol because they were getting hit. And so what they were doing was, one would be in front, and a few meters after you'll find another, and sometimes another. The idea is, if you hit one, we are going to respond almost immediately. You know, so it's not, you would rarely conduct a successful hit and run because response is just somewhere close. And if you think of what you can coordinate to hit 3, then it's almost impossible for you. So it brought down casualty rate. I don't know what the situation is, but indeed it calls for the need to reappraise some of these people and, you know, begin to rethink our security apparatus. We say we have satellites everywhere in the space. Would it be wrong sometimes when these patrols are going on that there could be some kind of area surveillance? The whites do it, you know, and, you know, there's somebody overlooking a place and directing the guys to say, hey, we think there is trouble here, or we suspect that this is not all clean. Or even where those people succeed in carrying out an operation, we could have a clue at least as to what's this nature of attack? How did it happen? Was it an ambush? How did they do it? You know, so that you build some of those feedbacks into your strategy and then cut down this casualty. Every time these people go down, it means our walls are being breached heavily, and it's something we will pay for if we are not careful. And when I say pay for it, we will pay for with our sovereignty if we are not careful.
Okay, so before we wrap up this segment of the program, let's take a look at another story about aviation fuel price rises by 70%. International airlines may rise fares. Just yesterday, a passenger was talking to me about traveling from Oshun to Abuja, and it was about 80,000, and that's quite for domestic, you know, travel alone. What are your thoughts about this?
Painful. Only recently we commissioned the work. I think we had even done it on the Daily Trust paper, where we had to say, lately in the last 3-4 years, we have seen a lot of influx of new carriers. Even the existing carriers improved capacities. Aeros have brought in more planes. Airpeace have brought in more planes. We have seen new entrants like Max and all of that. But why is this new entrance not translating into drop in prices? We have seen Grain Africa, you know, we have seen United Nigeria and all of that. But what's happening with more entrants, and we're still seeing prices going up? When we drill down on the issues, there are quite a number of issues that I've refused to go away. First of all is the issue of the dollar. The continuous devaluation had meant that for these people to sustain their operations, they have to raise prices. You know why? All maintenance are done abroad. And so they need dollars to do maintenance abroad. And because it is a highly regulated industry, you cannot skip maintenance. It's not like with the public transport where after we hit the road, then the driver will tell you, the brakes are not okay, but when we get to Kaduna, we will fix it. You can't do that mid-air, right? So there are standard specifications for how these things are done. You are being monitored even by the manufacturer of that airplane. Every time you take off and land, and the number of takeoff determines whether you draw closer to a maintenance date or not, and the nature of the maintenance. If not, it will be deemed unworthy to fly. Right. And even some of the pilots who are very careful will not even jump on those things if maintenance. That's why record keeping in that industry is huge. So if they have to do this maintenance abroad, they need the necessary dollars. And if you have to convert so much naira to a dollar, it means you have to charge so much naira to raise the dollar. That's one aspect of it too. And refineries aren't working. So we are not even doing petroleum, not to talk about jet one fuel. It also then means that fueling is done in dollars. So then the engineers who do these operations are also paid, the expatriates are paid in dollars. So when you think that you are operating in a naira environment and all your maintenance and cost of operation is dollarized, it then means for you to meet those obligations, you will have to charge so much. The worst case is we don't even have an MRO here, maintenance equipment here. To even manage some of those routine maintenance and not to even talk about spare parts. So it's a huge problem on the one hand that they are trying to live with because they operate in the same environment as ourselves. And the demands are increasing because with the insecurity, it means more and more people are going off the roads and jumping on these metal beds. And the other thing, you were talking about Ocean and these places is load factor. So if you then have to do an interior place where you may go and come back empty, it means the people going may be forced to pay twice as much to cover for whatever empty space they'll have to take back because they have to break even. It's a business in the first place before whatever we think of it. So it's a delicate issue and tackling it will require multi-pronged approach, including a concerted effort, maybe by industry players themselves, to come up with a maintenance facility around this country. And I think we deserve one with the number of metal beds that we have in this country. And then begin to think of other out-of-the-box approach, to take care of some of the lingering issues in the industry, including charges by government.
Okay, well, thank you so much for coming on the show. We've been speaking to Sunday Michael, Deputy Business Editor, Daily Trust, and reviewing some of the stories on the papers this morning. Our second guest is here to discuss the climate change action vis-a-vis the climate conference happening presently in Glasgow, Scotland. We'll talk about that right after the break. Stay with us.
latest updates on current topical issues and breaking news by downloading the Trust TV mobile app on your Android devices. Go online, click Google Play Store, search Trust TV, install the app, and get doses of unfiltered information on happenings all over the world in your pocket. Trust TV, documenting the Nigerian story.
Nice to see you, sir. You got a 10-year-old son, a 12-year-old son. He's a shill boy. Yeah. And how did he get to that stage? You allowed it to happen. You allowed it to fester. It's like a cancer.
It's a failure of the family, a failure of the society, and a failure of governance.
We are still going into some other hideouts to see if any apprehensions will be made tonight.
To operate within the context of the law with much respect to human rights.
All right, welcome back. You're still watching Daybreak on Trust TV. It's time for our first discussion, and our guest is already in the studio. Now, today we'll be talking about, climate change. President Muhammadu Buhari has made a commitment to cut carbon emission to net zero by 2060. Now, he made the declaration at the United Nations Climate Change Conference in Glasgow, UK. But analysts actually say Nigeria's commitment to climate action is short on details. And to answer some of our questions, we have Aliyu Sadiq, an environmentalist and a climate change advocate in the studio. But before we, cue him, let's watch this.
Africa is grateful. Since the pledges by the financial partners, the United Nations Convention to combat desertification has continued to give technical backstopping to the Pan-African Agency of the Great Green Wall through the establishment of Great Green Wall Accelerator for the 2021 to 2030 decennial priority investment plan for Great Green Wall program. This is to fast-track the implementation process with the prime purpose of translating the pledged financial resources of 19.68 billion United States dollars into hectares of land restoration and other livelihood improvements at various country levels. On progress of actions so far taken to actualize the process, Nigeria participated in drafting and harmonizing the result framework for the accelerator with 5 cardinal pillars to address the 2021-2030 decennial priority investment plan ambition of the Great Green Wall, with focus on the following: A, restoration of 100 million hectares of degraded land; B, sequestration of 250 million tons of carbon; C, creation of 10 million green jobs; D, resilient economic development in the various member states; E, capacity strengthening and development.
All right, that was President Muhammadu Buhari at the climate change conference happening in Glasgow, Scotland. Now we have Aliyu Sadiq in the studio. He's an environmentalist and a climate change advocate. Welcome to the show.
Thank you, Madam Zainab, and I'm glad to be here.
You drove all the way from Lafayette, isn't it?
Nasrawa, yes, Karo.
All right. Now, in the president's speech, he mentioned that Nigeria has restored degraded lands and is committed to restore 4 million more. But experts are raising concerns about how realistic this is. What are your thoughts about that?
Yes, I would say we are more of a promising-making country rather than an action-taking country, because you would find out that Nigeria, which is at the tropical part of the globe, we have faced, especially around the northern parts, the northeastern part of the country, we have a whole lot of desert encroachment, which is directly affecting farming activities. Lands are being deforested, as well as activities of local communities. A majority of, especially local people, depend on these firewoods for their source of cooking energy. As such, this has degraded the amount of land within that areas, which now the question is, the president made this statement, what are we seeing evidently? If during the last COP25, which happened in 2019, the president made a commitment that Nigeria was going to plant 25 million trees, yes, as part of efforts of the federal government to cushion the impact of climate change. Till date, I would say if really we are planting 25 million trees, I should see at least one beside my house or one in my community. But we only hear some of these commitments, some of these pledges, but then we really don't see this action on ground. We who are community activists, climate change, we, in fact, there are more efforts in the aspect of the CSOs who make a lot of efforts in terms of, there are a lot of NGOs who go as far as planting trees. So I would say the government is leveraging more on the actions of the CSO and NGOs rather than itself being part of the implementation. When you go to Federal Ministry of Environment, you find out that they always, especially Department of Climate Change, yes, there are a lot of policies put in place to ensure a holistic approach towards attacking the issues of climate change. But then they will tell you that they are not an implementation agency. So the bulk of the work rests on civil society, NGOs, community activists like me and many others. So I would say really it's a statement that is in process, because we are yet to see the impact of some of these pledges and commitments.
Okay, now aside the policies, do you think Nigeria has the technology and the capacity to actually drive climate action?
Yes, one of the take-home, or one of the our key demand at this COP26, we had a pre-COP, that's a pre-conference of parties at CSO networks. One of the main demand was for Africa to demand for technology transfer, knowledge transfer, as well as funding. Without the technology, the knowledge, and the funding, we can only keep making promises. Yes, we have the population, we have the resources, but without the technology and the knowledge to refine these resources into strategies that would help achieve climate change, we are really behind. And so far, so good. Nigeria, we can't compare ourselves to other nations taking real action, such as our neighboring Rwanda, who has gone far, and they are able to now show evidently their action towards achieving a green transition, and they are becoming a green city. Rwanda, now even the world makes an example of Rwanda as a green city in Africa. Now, Nigeria is far yet to reaching that extent and that level. So, irrespective that the COP26 didn't really go to our favor, I would say to a large extent, we are disappointed at some of the outcome of decisions made there, world leaders. We really need to put more effort. The federal government has a whole role to play in terms of this technology transfer. Now, it's not about the commitment, it's not about the beautiful policies on paper. It now has to do with how are you now bringing in this technology, renewable energy, solar. These are mitigation technologies, but then we have few technologies that or companies that are really into solar. We import, and even when we import, you find out that even to install, to maintain is a problem. So after installing off-grid solar in communities at grassroots, local communities who don't have access to the national grid, after this solar technologies get faulty, maintaining them is an issue. So that's a big gap as to how Nigeria can get to its commitment of saying we want to achieve net zero by 2060. What are we doing now to ensure net zero? Yeah, people like London made the commitment that by 2030 they would they would divest from petroleum-driven cars into clean electronic cars. These we are seeing evidently their commitments towards achieving this 2030. Now Nigeria, we are saying by 2060. So what are we seeing now towards 2060? If nothing, then it's more of a promise and without.
Okay, so would you say that we have stand-down policies to drive this cause?
Beautiful stand-down policies, yes. The recently approved climate change bill policy that was approved, I think, sometime in March, April this year. We have a whole lot of the NDCs, nationally determined contributions. That Nigeria submitted its intended NDC in 2015. The after some reviews and there was the fully drafted NDC that was submitted this 2021, and there are a lot of strategic plans in terms of energy, agriculture, forestry, transportation, waste. Waste was included recently, waste and water. These are strategies that can help achieve the net zero emission by 2060. They are really well detailed, achieved, and we even there is a part for the waste whereby there is how because 10% of global greenhouse gas emission emitted is actually from wastes due to unmanaged and improper management of waste. So part of the NDC is that for waste, they would it will be recycled and from organic waste into feed for animals, into cooking gas, into fertilizers to support agricultural. So there are a lot of take for example Lagos State, which I would say is a really focal state in terms of climate change in Nigeria. Lagos State has its own strategic plan. 5 year, it released its 5-year strategic plan aimed at cushioning the impact of climate change and achieving net zero. And they're already making impact. You find out that there's this BRT system of busing. This aim is to reduce the amount of cars on the road that makes use of fossil fuel. So when you have more of BRTs, people don't have to use their cars and go out for work, considering the number of emission that is being generated from this road. So we really have the policies. And all I would say is we need more of effort and political will to implement these policies.
Okay, now can you tell us a few dangers of climate change?
Yes, so the dangers of climate change goes across, irrespective of your profession, where you live, where you reside, it has a direct impact on both human health and the environment, as well as our biodiversity. When you go down to the southern part of the country, coastal regions, there is an increasing amount of flooding, as well as the north central parts, places like Benue, places that are proximity to river areas as well as ocean. This is as a result of rise in sea levels. When you have melting ice caps due to increasing temperature. Now, these ice caps melt, they can no longer, due to the harsh temperatures. As they melt, they tend to increase the sea levels. And this is what brings about the rise in cases of flooding. This flooding has devastating impact. When you go to Lagos State, I think this year we've recorded a whole amount of flooding cases. This has destroyed properties. This has killed lives of people. This has the loss and damage in terms of flooding is high. This is a result of climate change. When you go down up to the northern regions, northeast, northwest, I mentioned earlier issues of desertification. People who predominantly depend on agriculture as their major source of livelihood no longer have the favorable climate, and rainfall variation is no longer regular. The soils become more steeper. As such, they can't really be productive. So this is affecting the livelihood, and this has a direct linkage to issues of insecurity, because when the major source of my livelihood I have known since I grew up, I can no longer get the actual amount of productivity, it results to food insecurity. Now we're saying people by 2050, if care is not taken, especially Nigeria with a population of over 200, that this population is expected to double by 2050, 2100. We would have a lot of undernourished people would no longer have food. So climate change cut across. When I go back to issues of biodiversity, sea level of acidity increases. As such, the fishes, the aquatic animals in the oceans can no longer survive this severe, extreme, harsh weathers. And it's people. There are a lot of people who depend on fishing as their major source of livelihood. So when these fishes are, in fact, there's an assumption which is also as a result of research that by 2050 we'll have more plastics in the ocean than fish. Now, this shows you that the fish can no longer, apart from fish, other animals can no longer withstand if we don't meet or maintain 1.5 degrees of global rise in temperature. By 2 degrees rise in temperature, it will be unbearable for us to even survive or live on the Earth's surface. So that's how extreme the impact of climate change is, and how devastating it is to we as individuals and our community.
Okay. Now, with China and Russia, world's largest polluter, absent, at the COP26 presently, where does this leave the rest of the world?
Yes, there was I think 2 days ago I was on social media, and there were more. It will surprise you to know that there were even more fossil fuel companies at the COP than green investors. This is why I mentioned that we, Nigeria, we are really not happy, and we are disappointed at the outcome of some of the COP26 proceedings. There was the organizer of the COP, that's the president of the COP, Alok Sharma. There were some speculations that he got donations to organize the COP from fossil fuel companies. Now, while we are saying we want an end to fossil fuel, we want to achieve net zero by 2050, we are making commitment towards green divestment, we want renewable energy, we want this, and then we are seeing more of fossil fuel now championing some of these proceedings. So it's a red flag that really we are not really in line with our objectives. China, Russia, and other countries, I feel they are shying away from the truth, and that's based on the capitalist nature, and I believe they are doing that based on their personal interests. Right. Because when Barack Obama made his speech yesterday, he said, which is a fact, climate change is not an issue of my country or your country. Climate change is a global threat that might really destroy the entire world. So if China, Russia are shying away from, making a commitment towards achieving the targets of the Paris Agreement, which is to achieve to maintain 1.5 or to avoid a temperature from reaching 2 degrees, but to be surprised that they are not even showing up and participating in these proceedings that will help achieve this, it really means that we have a lot. We cannot achieve this without the cooperation of especially dominant and powerful nations such as China, Russia. So I would say these nations have to look beyond just profits. They have to look beyond what they stand to gain now. And it doesn't profit the net amount that was estimated to help achieve 1.5 is approximately around $15 trillion. Now, to mitigate it below 2 degrees, below 1.5 degrees, about $30 trillion, about 2 degrees, about $15 trillion. But it has a price. Now, not taking action has a more severe price. The loss, damage, and effects we stand to experience when we don't take action or spend this amount of money, we might be faced with damages of up to about 60 trillion in the next 100 to 150 years. So while China depends on the profits without looking at the aspect of green transition, let's go green, I would say it's more of a wise man who thinks he's not wise. So they really need to come on deck, come to the chair of negotiation, and strike a balance to achieve sustainable development that will bring about green growth, economic progress, as well as the social growth of the entire world.
Okay, well, we actually have a lot of countries coming out to say in 2060, in 2030, but then scientists have actually said, you know, the benchmark should be 10 years. 10 years, or it's going to be devastating. Do you think 10 years is achievable at all?
The truth is 10 years it's not achievable. That's because for every action there are processes towards achieving the action or the aim of what. Now when we say 10 years, when we say 20 years, the target is, some countries are saying 2050. Nigeria by as at the last COP said 2050. Now
it moved it 10 years.
The this current COP26, Nigeria is saying by 2060. That is because they are seeing it evidently that it is not achievable. But it boils down to planning. It boils down to finance, climate finance. What is the amount set aside? During the last COP, there was a commitment by countries to donate $100 billion annually to developing countries who are most affected by climate change, to help them adapt, such as technology transfer, and as well as bring about the adaptation strategies. But then when you look at the commitments, it is not forthcoming. The 100 billion go to communities, go to grassroots. These funds are said to have been disbursed, but you don't see the impact. And again, level of corruption, it's another issue. In 2014, about 9 billion naira was approved by the federal government to support clean cooking in rural communities. And to my surprise and to the surprise of many civil society, the money was followed by code Hamza Lawal to see there was really no impact. 9 billion naira, there was no impact. So without deliberate political will, transparency, the financing, the commitment, we really cannot achieve even the 2060 that we're saying. There has to be a change in the status quo. We have to now sit down and move from business as usual and be deliberate that, okay, by 20 this, what are we now putting in place? That in the next 10 years, do we have a monitoring mechanism that, okay, we can record progress, achievements, what are the lessons learned, how can we put it to the next phase of our action, 2030, 2040. This is now where we can now measure our progress and say, okay, by 2060 or latest by 2070 we can achieve. But without this put in place, it is really just a story to say, and we might not really get to where we wish to get to.
Okay, now before we wrap up, this segment of the program, more young people, are going into climate action and all of that, and you are one of them. You recently spoke at the COP26 side event of the Commonwealth Youth Network. Could you walk us through, some of the conversations around, that?
Yes, I am glad to say that more young people around the world are taking action because the threats of climate change might not really, we're seeing the impact now, but the impact are minute compared to what we might experience in the next 50 to 100 years. And young people are the generation of the future. So that is why young people are now standing up and saying, no, leaders of the old generation, save our generation, save us, else we might really have no stories to tell because we won't even be able to survive. The young lady Greta Thunberg, who was a 13-year-old girl, was able to inspire a lot of young people from across the world. And now we have a lot of activists from Gambia, from Kenya, people like Elizabeth Watuti, Vanessa Nakate, and many others who are now standing up and rising to, say these are the issues, these are the challenges, save our generation. And the good thing is, not every leader is listening, but it is still attracting a larger amount of momentum for the climate change movement. While the COP was ongoing, I was invited by the COP, by the Commonwealth Youth Climate Change Network, to talk about actions, locally led climate actions we are doing across in Nigeria, as well as other activists across the country, across the globe. And it was really inspiring to see not just my work, but the work of other people from across the world taking action in the aspect of waste management, waste to wealth, renewable energy, climate change education for schools, building the generation of the younger generation to be able to have a better knowledge as to the issue, because when you don't know the problem, you won't be able to identify the solution. But now there was a program we had which is still ongoing, a fellowship for young students in secondary schools, and while we had a boot camp, we were able to now, it was more of idea harvesting. Okay, we're able to bring them down to understand the problem. While we started, they were really ignorant about whatever it is, and the anointing is the schools we go to, they don't really prepare us for the reality of life. I studied geography and environmental management, but I'll tell you, most of what I learned in terms of the environment is really not in my classroom, it's out of the classroom. So they were able to make them understand the issue, and then we went down to, now while we were having a more of an idea harvest session, I was really, intrigued to see the level of ideas this student had. Now, take for example, these ideas are now being, propelled into solutions, and then there are finances to champion them into actions. These students will be motivated to do more. But when you have ideas, there was the Youth Incubation Hub that the Federal Ministry of Environment organized, and young people from across the country, various regions, came up with their ideas, beautiful ideas, solar, bicycles, waste to briquettes to support cooking energy for local communities. And then after all these ideas were harvested and these people had to, it's really disheartening to say that ideas were just gathered and nothing was done about it. So there is really no motivation, irrespective that the young people are rising up to say, okay, this, we want to take action. There should be some level of encouragement to support their ideas, as well as build their knowledge, capacity building to make them. This brings the aspect of knowledge transfer as technology transfer to achieve the vision of the presidents of 2060. Yes.
Okay. Thank you so much for taking time out of your busy schedule to speak to us on climate change. Aliyu Sadiq, he's an environmentalist and he is also a climate change activist. He also created Waste to Wealth Management. Hopefully, we'll have you some other time.
And we hope to be at, your place to see some of the great work that you do as well.
Definitely.
Thank you so much.
All right, stay tuned. When we come back after the break, it'll be time for our second discussion.
Suleiman, Aya, and Tari, all from the Sulubawa clan, with a unique wealth of culture and deep love for cattle, which truly reflects their sense of family. But over time, everything changes, with no lands for grazing. Experience the incredible story of the Fulani people, loved ones they must protect, the journey they must take.
Get latest updates on current topical issues and breaking news by downloading the Trust TV mobile app on your Android devices. Go online, click Google Play Store, search Trust TV, install the app, and get doses of unfiltered information on happenings all over the world in your pocket. Trust TV, documenting the Nigerian story.
Nice to see you, sir. You got a 10-year-old son, a 12-year-old son. He's a shill boy. Yeah, and how did he get to that stage? You allowed it to happen. You allow it to fester. It's like a cancer.
It's a failure of the family, a failure of the society, and a failure of governance.
We are still going into some other hideouts to see if any apprehensions will be made tonight.
To operate within the context of the law with much respect to human rights.
All right, you are still watching Daybreak on Trust Television. We all know that Ember months usually comes at the end of the year, usually from September to December, and these are periods that people travel a lot. And we all know that the Federal Road Safety Corps usually kick off campaigns, to sensitize people, on the dangers of people traveling a lot. To discuss this, we have in the studio Charles Edem, Deputy Public Corps Officer, Education Officer rather, with the Federal Road Safety Corps. Welcome to the program.
Thank you very much.
All right, so first off, let's start with what the myth is about Ember Month. What is it to fear about Ember Month?
Thank you very much for the question. The truth of the matter is that Nigerians have sadly come to believe that a whole lot of bad things happen during the Ember Months. On a lighter note, they will say, okay, this is a period that all the witches in the world converge to maybe have their AGM, annual general meeting. And in the course of that, of course, they cast out spells here and there, especially on the road where people travel a lot and maybe death occur or other things. But that, of course, like you said, is a myth. The reality is that we Nigerians have not done our own part in terms of planning our journeys and, of course, adhering to traffic rules and regulations, which, of course, is the key thing concerning these movements on the road. So there's nothing evil about these months. They are just like every other month in the calendar year.
Okay. So could you talk to us, about the campaign that the Federal Road Safety Corps usually put together, to sensitize travelers?
Yeah, thank you. And the FRSC has a tradition when it comes to not just the embalmment, festive periods. We embark on aggressive public enlightenment and maybe deployment of personnel and logistics on the road. We tend to leave the comfort of our office and get ourselves on the road where the real things are happening to check people's attitude on the road and of course caution and make sure that people drive adhering to traffic rules and regulations.
Okay, so what campaign has actually been flagged for this year?
Yeah, there's the Operation Zero Tolerance to Traffic Crashes.
Okay.
And it's been flagged off. But then the major thing will start from 17th of December to 15th of January 2022. 17th of January, of December 2021 to 15th of January 2022. And in this period, we will see a whole lot of road safety presence on the road. We have of activities to ensure that people move from where they are to where they are going and get back safely. So you'll see our help units on red alert, 24 hours patrol activities will commence. We'll have a kind of transit camps for officers and men so that they can hit the road early enough to check the flow of traffic. The essence is for us to check that Nigerians have hitch-free journeys to wherever they are going to. And of course, critical corridors. Like what we do conventionally is we monitor the flow of traffic. When it's during the maybe Muslim festival, you see the traffic flowing towards the northern axis, and the Christmas festival, of course, you see it flowing towards the southeast and south rest of it. So we tend to employ and deploy logistics towards that axis to ensure free flow of traffic.
Okay. Now, recently there has been quite a number of road accidents, happening even within the capital city. What could be responsible, for this?
Well, that's the Nigerian factor for you. Sum it all, impatience. Like in our course of investigating the cause of road traffic crashes, we came up with the findings that 3 factors are basically responsible for road traffic crashes, and that is the human factor, the mechanical factor, and the environmental factor. Put differently, the driver, the vehicle, and the road. So how do we mean human factor? Like I said, the driver, he's the one that is impatient, he's the one that does not do the normal vehicle parade, check the vehicles to ensure that the vehicle is in shape to embark on such journeys. Is the one that operates the vehicle. He has, about 90% control of the vehicle. So he's the one to decide at what speed to go.
Right.
He's the one to decide what number of passengers to carry, and of course the weight of the load he's carrying in the vehicle. He knows the road, and every other thing revolves around the driver. So in terms of maybe apportioning blame, personally, I give about 90% of the blame to the driver. Aside the driver, of course, the vehicle is there, the mechanical factor. Yeah, it's a man-made thing. It could fail at any point in time, but then it still behoves on the driver to ensure that the needful is done before embarking on journeys with such vehicles, like checking the vehicles, maintaining the vehicles as and when due. Then we leave that, we go to the road. Yeah, the road entails the physical road itself, the bends, the junctions, and the rest, the engineering factor of the road. All those things form part of that environmental cause of a road traffic crash.
Right.
So the driver, of course, again, knows the condition of the road. He knows at, okay, so point, we have the potholes, we have bends, and this. So he's the one to caution himself when approaching such areas, cut down the speed and the rest. But where he fails, and believes that everything should go the way it is, of course, the next thing would be for a traffic crash to happen, and the blame, of course, I put on the driver.
Okay, what kind of sanctions do you give to drivers or riders who go against traffic rules and regulations? Because I actually came across one this morning, and if I hadn't, been smart, it wouldn't have ended up well at all. So.
Yeah, like we are empowered to first educate. We educate them. That's where the public enlightenment aspect comes in. But where that aspect of education is not yielding result, of course, we carry out subtle enforcement. And that enforcement is where probably you're looking at. Any driver that goes against any of the traffic rules, of course, our booking sheet is there. There are offenses spelled out for dangerous driving, wrongful overtaking, use of seat belts, disobedience to traffic rules, and a whole lot of about 39 offenses which we met out on any driver that errs. And apart from that, in extreme cases where probably we use the alcoholizer to test the driver for a bit drunk driving, and it's discovered that the person is positive for alcohol intake, of course we have the power to impound the vehicle and disallow the driver from continuing the journey. So impounding the vehicle and disrupting the journey is one of such sanctions which nobody normally likes, and a whole lot.
Okay.
And some drivers are sometimes subjected to emotional test to know their frame of mind, because it's not just right that you are in your right frame of mind, you're not mad at something, and you see the traffic light that says stop, and you decide to cross, not minding. Of course, there must be something wrong with that person. So we have a whole lot of things that we do to drivers just to ensure that they keep to the rule of driving.
Okay. Now, do you have, any mechanism in place, to respond swiftly, to accident scenarios within the city?
Of course, like talking about the FRSC structure, we have the headquarters here in Abuja. We have 12 zonal commands cut across the country. Then we have the state commands too, like the ones we call the sector command. We have 36 of them, and well over 200 unit commands and outposts, a whole lot of them, and ambulance points. All those things are put in place to ensure that we respond to emergencies as swift as possible. We have this golden rule of 15 minutes, which we are even working towards reducing further, so that when it happens, we are there on ground to ensure that first we take care of those that have survived it, administer first aid, and get the ambulance to take the person to the nearest help center, from there maybe to a specialized hospital also. But the main thing is that we try to nip it in the bud, get the drivers, talk with them, educate them, and get them to do the right thing at all times.
Okay, now from the drivers, let's move to your officers. How do you handle officers who misuse their power on the road? Because yesterday, someone I know posted a story of a Bolt driver, a lady who was stopped by FRSC officials, and her papers were complete. She had a driver's license, everything was intact, but they still wouldn't let her go, and they, it resorted to, a little bit of scuffle with the lady, and they attempted to deflate her tires as well. How do you, how do you handle such officers?
Good. The FRSC is doing everything possible. One thing we should equally understand is, like when we do our recruitment, we don't have maybe a specific place, maybe in heaven also, to go and pick people to come and do the work. We pick from the same corrupt society, kind of. And when we come in, when we bring them in, we do our best to ensure that we try to instill that virtue of uprightness in all our offices. But of course, we know we're doing our best, but then it's still not good enough. In quotes, we're still working it. I mean, like, let's say learning is a continuous process. We still try to put them in line. And that aside, we put other things in place to help us check maybe a kind of feedback mechanism. Like of recent, I think in September this year, the Corps procured some equipment for monitoring, field monitoring and control. Okay. Yeah, we have a center where we monitor everything that happens on the road. That, of course, will tell every reasonable officer that whatever action you're taking out there on the road is being monitored in the office, and they would, of course, keep to the basic rules while doing such. And yes, the society is, I wouldn't say bad, but then everything is not really all right. So there will still have some. Maybe in every 12 we have a black sheep or so, and such people we have put mechanism in place in the office to take care of them. All we need to do is to get the basic evidence as which we can use in maybe meeting whatever punishments our books have specified for such actions. So. And that aside to, we are working in collaboration with Hakim Fadei. There's what's it called now, Flagit. There's this Flagit application on the Global Play Store where everybody is encouraged to download and have on a phone. Where you notice any of such irregularities, you are at liberty to maybe escalate it to the office and we take action.
Okay. That's a really smart move.
That's really, really nice. Now, many would agree that there's a lot of traffic indiscipline, in Nigeria. What could be responsible for this? Is it lack of education, or what really is the problem?
Sorry, yesterday I was listening to, I think, the train station manager yesterday on an interview. He said something very critical. But if Nigerians would allow themselves to school themselves to the point of obeying rules and regulations, we wouldn't be having this discussion. So I think it's just that sad reality that Nigerians are not really, well, let me not make a bogus statement, but most of them are not configured to carry out specific rules and regulations, and that is a big problem. And that is where the education comes in. Like within this period, and in short, generally, we carry out enlightenment programs at the parks, at the traffic junctions, we go to schools, we go to mosques, we go to churches, a whole lot of places just to talk with the people, to influence their thinking faculty, get them back to realize that for everything we do in life, there are rules governing them. And if we adhere to these rules, I mean, they should know that these rules are well thought out, born of good critical thinking. We have done our analysis, know that, okay, if you have to cross the road, you have to look left, look right, look left again, and if it is safe to do so, you walk briskly across the road, don't run. And if every Nigerian is made to understand why this is done, of course we think that our society will be better off for it. But sadly enough, most of them don't want to do that. A case in point is, maybe you're here, and at that point there, you have the pedestrian bridge, and you see my brothers and sisters not minding the flow of the traffic, who prefer to cross the road, not using the pedestrian bridge. And you ask yourself, how did we get here? Where did we get it wrong? So that's just the issue. If we can make every Nigerian subject himself or herself to rules and regulations, of course, I think we will make a headway.
Okay, can you give us a few tips to staying safe this Ember month?
Yeah, we would advise everybody that intends to travel, everybody that has somebody that intends to travel, to please note that being on the road is a serious business. Before you embark on the journey, ensure, number one, if you're going to drive, you are licensed to do so. You have learned the basics of driving, both practical and theoretical aspects of it. Ensure that your vehicle is in a good condition to embark on that journey. Like we say, that a vehicle well maintained is a journey half concluded. It's very, very important. Get your maps ready and plan your journey to make out time for some unforeseen circumstances, some delays, so that you won't be in a rush to meet up with time. It is very, very important.
Okay.
Always bear at the back of your mind that those you leave behind will always look forward to having you come back in one piece. Plan your journeys, take out time, rest after, take about 15 minutes break after every 4 hours drive while embarking on the journey. Don't overload your vehicle, don't speed. Speed trails, but then it's the same speed that kills. So please, so many things you need to do. And if that journey is not that necessary, not that important, a phone call can suffice. Some people want to leave Abuja here to go and attend wedding in Sokoto and the rest of it. Whether you're there or not, since you're not the father of the bride, the wedding will still hold.
True.
Some people give you the invitation, not necessarily to have you there.
True.
Your support. Thank God for the bank transfer here and that you can do and send a goodwill message. And when eventually you have the opportunity of getting there, you can still felicitate with them. So journeys, the roads are not really safe per se, as in terms of security and rest. So why do you want to risk your life? So we're pleading with Nigerians, please do the needful, stay within the ambit of the law when you're on the road, and everything will go fine.
Well, thank you so much for coming on the show. We have been speaking to Charles Edem, Deputy Public Core Education Officer with the Federal Road Safety Corps, discussing surviving the Ember Month. You're still watching Daybreak on Trust Television. We're going to take a short break. When we come back, we're going to wrap up the show. Stay tuned. I think this is where we draw the curtain. Today has been really enlightening. I've actually learned so much, and you know, it was fun while it lasted, right, Zainab? Right, it was indeed. I really, enjoyed, countering the myth about Ember Months, because there's so much, this bubble around the Ember Months.
Yeah, once it's Ember Months, our parents start to say, be careful, pray a lot, yes, and it's quite funny. But then we hope that, we do enough to take care of ourselves, especially when we're on the roads. We follow the traffic rules and regulations, drive safe so that we can get to our destinations, as and when we're supposed to. My name is Darshan Husseina Usman, and I would like to wish you a really, really, really successful week ahead.
And I'm Zainab Bala. Thank you so much for joining us.